What if I told you that the ancient Romans possessed technological capabilities that we only rediscovered in the modern age? What if some of their innovations were so advanced that when their civilization fell, humanity lost knowledge that wouldn't return for over 1,000 years? And what if there are technologies they mastered that we still haven't fully understood today? Welcome to a journey into one of history's most compelling mysteries, the lost technologies of ancient Rome. Technologies that challenge everything we think we know about the capabilities of ancient civilizations. Technologies that raise unsettling questions about the linear progression of human knowledge. And technologies that some believe point to something far more mysterious than simple engineering genius. The story begins in the year 126 AD, with a building that still stands in Rome today, defying modern engineering principles and leaving architects scratching their heads nearly 2,000 years later. The Pantheon. You've probably seen pictures of it. A magnificent domed structure with a perfect circular opening at its top, flooding the interior with divine light. But here's what most people don't know. The Pantheon's dome remains the largest unreinforced concrete dome in the world. Not the largest ancient concrete dome, the largest concrete dome, period. Modern engineers have studied this structure extensively, and what they've found is genuinely baffling. The concrete used in the Pantheon is not only still standing after 2 millennia of earthquakes, weather, and wear, but in some ways, it's actually superior to modern concrete. How is this possible? The Romans used a specific recipe involving volcanic ash from Pozzuoli, lime, and seawater that created a chemical reaction resulting in concrete that actually grows stronger over time, especially when exposed to seawater. Think about that for a moment. Our modern concrete begins deteriorating almost immediately upon exposure to salt water. Bridges, piers, and coastal structures require constant maintenance and eventual replacement. Yet Roman concrete, particularly their harbor structures, have been sitting in seawater for 2,000 years and are still intact. In fact, marine biologists have discovered that Roman concrete encourages the growth of certain minerals that actually strengthen the structure over time. Scientists at the University of California, Berkeley, and other institutions have spent years trying to recreate this Roman concrete formula. They've made progress, but here's the disturbing part. We still don't fully understand why it works as well as it does. The Romans left no detailed instructions, no technical manuals, no engineering specifications. When their civilization collapsed, this knowledge simply vanished. For over 1,500 years, humanity forgot how to make concrete at all, let alone concrete superior to what we produce today with all our modern technology. But Roman concrete is just the beginning of this mystery. Let's talk about something even more extraordinary: Roman surgical instruments and medical knowledge. In 1950, archaeologists excavating the ruins of Pompeii made a startling discovery. They found a complete set of surgical instruments in what appeared to be a physician's house. These weren't primitive tools. We're talking about scalpels, forceps, bone drills, speculums, catheters, and even surgical saws that look remarkably similar to instruments used in operating rooms today. The sophistication is staggering. Romans were performing cataract surgery, removing bladder stones, and conducting complex amputations with survival rates that wouldn't be matched again until the late 19th century. They understood antiseptic principles, using wine and vinegar to clean wounds. They knew about anesthesia, using opium and henbane to sedate patients. They even practiced a form of plastic surgery, reconstructing noses and other features damaged in battle. Here's where it gets really interesting. Ancient Roman medical texts describe procedures that sound almost impossible for the time. The physician Galen, who lived in the 2nd century AD, wrote about the function of nerves. describing experiments where he would sever different spinal nerves in animals and observe the resulting paralysis. This is neurological research. Galen understood that the brain controlled the body through the nervous system, a concept that medieval physicians completely abandoned, believing instead that the heart was the center of thought and sensation. How did this knowledge disappear? Why did it take until the Renaissance for European medicine to rediscover principles that Roman physicians knew? Some historians argue it was simply the chaos of Rome's collapse, the burning of libraries, the loss of literacy. But others suggest something more troubling, that perhaps Roman knowledge was deliberately suppressed during the Middle Ages, deemed too pagan, too associated with a fallen empire. Now, let's venture into even more mysterious territory. In 1900, sponge divers off the Greek island of Antikythera discovered an ancient shipwreck. Among the treasures recovered was a corroded lump of bronze and wood that didn't attract much attention initially. It sat in a museum for decades before someone took a closer look. What they found changed our understanding of ancient technology forever. The Antikythera Mechanism, as it came to be known, is an ancient Greek analog computer dating to around 100 BC, during the height of Roman influence in the Mediterranean. Using modern X-ray and CT scan technology, scientists have been able to reconstruct how this device worked. And what they discovered is almost unbelievable. This mechanism contains over 30 bronze gears, precisely cut and arranged in a complex system that could predict the positions of the sun, moon, and planets. It could forecast eclipses years in advance. It tracked the Olympic Games cycle. It displayed the lunar calendar. This isn't just a calendar or a simple astronomical tool. This is mechanical computing. The level of precision in the gear cutting requires technology that, according to our history books, didn't exist for another 1,500 years. Think about the implications. Someone in the ancient world understood gear ratios, differential gearing, and mechanical calculation well enough to build this device. The next time humanity created something of comparable complexity was in the 14th century with the development of mechanical astronomical clocks. That's a gap of 1,400 years. Where did this knowledge come from? Why was there only one of these found? Surely such useful technology would have been widespread, copied, improved upon. Unless it wasn't. Unless this was rare, specialized knowledge held by a select few. Knowledge that died with them. But wait, because we're about to go deeper. Some researchers have pointed out details about the Antikythera mechanism that don't add up. The device tracks the metonic cycle, which is the 19-year period it takes for lunar phases to repeat on the same solar calendar dates. It tracks the Saros cycle, the 18-year period used to predict eclipses. These are sophisticated astronomical concepts. But here's the question that keeps some historians up at night. Why would ancient people need such precise astronomical prediction if they were only using it for calendar purposes or navigation? One controversial theory suggests the mechanism was used for something else entirely. Some researchers point to ancient texts that describe how priests would predict celestial events to maintain their power and influence over the population. Imagine being able to predict a solar eclipse in 100 BC. You would appear to have divine knowledge, the ability to communicate with the gods themselves. Could the Antikythera mechanism have been a tool of the ancient priesthood, a way to maintain control through seemingly supernatural predictions? Others go even further, suggesting that the mechanism's precision and complexity indicate knowledge that couldn't have been developed through simple observation and trial and error. They argue that such sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics required advanced mathematical concepts and observational tools that we have no record of from that period. It's almost as if someone in the ancient world had access to knowledge they shouldn't have had. Now, I can hear the skeptics already. Ancient people were intelligent and capable. Given enough time and motivation, they could figure out complex systems. And that's absolutely true. But here's what troubles researchers. It's not just one lost technology. It's dozens. And they all seem to disappear around the same time, during the fall of Rome and the subsequent Dark Ages. Let's talk about Roman architecture beyond just concrete. The Romans built a heating system called the hypocaust, which circulated hot air beneath floors and through walls, providing central heating. This technology was so effective that homes stayed warm even during harsh winters. After Rome fell, this knowledge was lost. Europeans spent the next 1,000 years shivering in castles with fireplaces that heated one room at a time, sending most of their heat up the chimney. Central heating didn't return until the 19th century. The Romans built aqueducts that moved water across vast distances using only gravity, with such precise engineering that the water flowed at a constant, controlled rate. Some Roman aqueducts are still functioning today. Yet medieval engineers struggled to supply water to cities, often relying on contaminated wells and rivers. The engineering knowledge required to build these structures had simply vanished. And then there's Roman glassmaking. The Romans produced glass with optical properties comparable to modern lenses. The Lycurgus cup, housed in the British Museum, is a 4th century Roman glass cup that appears green in reflected light, but glowing red when light shines through it. This is due to colloidal gold and silver particles in the glass, creating what we now call a plasmonic effect. This nanotechnology wasn't recreated until the 20th century. How did Roman craftsmen achieve this? We still don't entirely know. But perhaps the most unsettling lost technology involves something that sounds like science fiction: Greek fire. This was a Byzantine weapon developed by the successors to Rome that could burn on water. Imagine medieval naval warfare. Ships are made of wood. Fire is devastating. But water puts out fire, so ships at sea were relatively safe from flame weapons. Until Greek fire. This substance could be sprayed from tubes mounted on ships, igniting on contact with water and burning so intensely that it couldn't be extinguished by conventional means. The Byzantine Empire used Greek fire to defend Constantinople for centuries, turning back numerous invasions. Enemies were terrified of it. They tried to steal the formula to capture the craftsmen who made it. But the secret was so closely guarded that when the Byzantine Empire finally fell, the formula died with it. To this day, we don't know exactly what Greek fire was. Theories range from a petroleum-based mixture to something involving quicklime or phosphorus. But nothing we've tried has exactly replicated the ancient descriptions. How can a formula for such a powerful weapon be so completely lost that modern chemistry can't definitively recreate it? What else did the Byzantines know that died with them? Now, here's where things get really interesting. Some alternative historians and theorists have proposed a radical idea: that the Romans didn't invent all these technologies themselves, that they inherited them from even older civilizations, or that they received help from an outside source. Ancient astronaut theorists point to curious details in Roman and earlier art, images that seem to show technological objects that shouldn't exist. The Baghdad Battery, clay jars from ancient Mesopotamia that some researchers believe were primitive electrical cells. Legends of flying machines in ancient Sanskrit texts. Depictions of what look like light bulbs in Egyptian temples. Could there be a connected thread here? A lost technological civilization, or even extraterrestrial contact that left behind knowledge that ancient peoples used but didn't fully understand? Before you dismiss this as fringe theory, consider this. Many Roman technological achievements were based on even older knowledge. The Romans learned engineering from the Etruscans, who preceded them in Italy. The Etruscans, in turn, according to their own legends, received their knowledge from a divine teacher named Tages who emerged from the earth. Mystery schools in ancient Greece claimed to possess secret knowledge passed down from Atlantis or other legendary civilizations. The Library of Alexandria, before it burned, supposedly contained texts describing technologies and knowledge from the ancient world that would seem magical to us. What if there's a grain of truth to these stories? What if there was an earlier technological civilization, not necessarily as advanced as ours, but sophisticated enough to have knowledge that seemed miraculous to later generations? When that civilization fell, perhaps due to natural disaster, war, or environmental collapse, its knowledge scattered. Some survived in places like Rome, preserved by craftsmen and engineers who didn't fully understand the principles behind what they were making, simply following ancient instructions. And when those craftsmen died without passing on their knowledge, it was lost forever. This theory, while speculative, would explain some puzzling facts. It would explain why certain technologies appear suddenly in the historical record without apparent development. It would explain why the same sophisticated astronomical knowledge appears in cultures separated by vast distances. And it would explain why so much knowledge vanished so completely during the Dark Ages. Not because it was simply forgotten, but because it was never fully understood in the first place. It was inherited technology, used but not truly comprehended. Of course, mainstream archaeology and history reject this idea. They argue, quite reasonably, that human ingenuity and gradual development over centuries can explain all these achievements. They point out that just because we don't have written records of how something was done doesn't mean the knowledge was mysterious or extraterrestrial. Many ancient techniques were trade secrets, passed down orally within families or guilds. When those families died out or those guilds disbanded, the secrets died with them. It's unfortunate, but not supernatural. And yet, questions remain. Why did the Romans build their concrete structures to last millennia when most buildings were only expected to stand for decades? Did they know something about long-term planning that we don't? Why create something as complex as the Antikythera Mechanism when simpler astronomical tools will have sufficed for navigation or calendar keeping? What purpose did it really serve? Some researchers have suggested that ancient Rome and the civilizations before it had a different relationship with knowledge than we do today. We live in the information age, where knowledge is meant to be shared, published, distributed as widely as possible. But in the ancient world, knowledge was power. Powerful families, priesthoods, and guilds guarded their secrets jealously. A craftsman who knew how to make something valuable would teach only his own children, under oath never to reveal the technique to outsiders. This meant that knowledge was fragile. A plague that killed a master craftsman and his apprentices could erase a technology forever. A war that destroyed a city could wipe out generations of accumulated wisdom. And when Rome fell, the chaos that followed destroyed not just buildings and people, but the delicate chains of knowledge transmission that held civilization together. Yet even accepting this explanation, some mysteries remain too strange to dismiss easily. The precision of certain Roman constructions suggests measurement and calculation tools that we haven't found. Some Roman buildings are aligned to astronomical events with an accuracy that should require telescopes to achieve. Roman mining operations show evidence of hydraulic techniques that required an understanding of fluid dynamics that shouldn't exist for another 1,500 years. And then there are the stories. Ancient texts that describe things that sound like technology, but can't be technology because the historical timeline doesn't allow it. Archimedes' heat ray, supposedly used to burn Roman ships during the siege of Syracuse. Ancient accounts describe him using mirrors to focus sunlight, and set ships ablaze from a distance. Most historians dismiss this as legend, but experiments have shown it's theoretically possible. Did Archimedes actually build such a device? If so, what else could ancient engineers create that we've dismissed as myth? The Roman architect Vitruvius wrote about machines and devices in his work De Architectura, some of which are illustrated and explained in detail, while others are mentioned only briefly, almost as if assuming the reader already knows about them. What were these other machines? Were they common enough that detailed descriptions weren't necessary? Or were they secret, mentioned only in passing because Vitruvius couldn't say more without breaking confidence? There's also the mystery of Roman roads. Yes, we know they built incredible roads, but recent archaeological surveys using ground-penetrating radar have revealed that Roman road construction was even more sophisticated than we realized. Some roads have multiple layers of carefully selected and treated materials, with drainage systems that remain functional after 2,000 years. The roads were built with a crown surface for water runoff, with specific materials chosen for their properties in different climate zones. This isn't just engineering. This is material science. But who figured out which materials to use? How many roads had to fail before they perfected the technique? Where are the experimental roads, the failures, the learning process? In modern engineering, we test materials extensively, run simulations, build prototypes. The Romans seem to get it right immediately, building roads that have outlasted civilizations. Either they had a very long development period that we have no records of, or they were working from knowledge that came from somewhere else. Let's talk about something that rarely gets discussed: Roman mining technology. The Romans extracted gold, silver, copper, tin, and iron on an industrial scale. At Las Medulas in Spain, they moved entire mountains using a technique called hushing, where they would build reservoirs above a site, then release the water all at once to wash away, overburden, and expose veins. This required sophisticated understanding of hydraulics, geology, and engineering. They built aqueducts specifically to supply water to mining operations hundreds of miles away. Roman mines show evidence of advanced ventilation systems, underground water management, and structural support techniques. Some mines went hundreds of feet deep, requiring pumps and lifts. We found evidence of screw pumps and chain pumps in Roman mines that could move water upward, fighting gravity. These weren't simple devices. They required metal casting, precise measurements, and an understanding of mechanical advantage. And here's something that should make you think. After Rome fell, European mining technology actually regressed. Medieval mines were shallower, less safe, and less productive. It took until the Renaissance for mining to reach Roman levels again. Why? What knowledge was lost? Some historians believe entire libraries of technical documents existed, practical handbooks for engineers and craftsmen that were kept in temples and schools. When these institutions were destroyed or abandoned, the books were lost. The Library of Alexandria is the most famous example, but it wasn't the only one. Rome had numerous libraries, as did other major cities of the empire. When these burned or were destroyed during various invasions and upheavals, we lost not just philosophy and literature, but potentially technical manuals, engineering specifications, and scientific observations accumulated over centuries. Some scholars estimate that we have less than 10% of all written works from classical antiquity. 90% is gone, lost to fire, decay, deliberate destruction, or simple neglect. What was in that 90%? How many technical secrets? How many descriptions of machines and methods that we now think are impossible for ancient people to have possessed? There's another factor worth considering: materials. Many ancient devices and structures were made of bronze, wood, or other materials that corrode, rot, or get recycled. A bronze gear mechanism that breaks might simply be melted down to make coins or weapons. A wooden device, no matter how sophisticated, might be burned for fuel during a hard winter. We only find the things that survived, which means we're seeing a tiny fraction of what actually existed. The Antikythera Mechanism survived only because it sank in a shipwreck and was covered by sediment that protected it. How many similar devices rusted away on land or were melted down for their valuable metal. The fact that we found even one suggests there were others. But where are they? Were they rare, valuable items owned by the wealthy and priests? Or were they more common than we think, with only one happening to survive by pure chance? Some researchers have proposed that we're thinking about ancient technology all wrong. We assume that because ancient peoples didn't have computers or electricity, they couldn't achieve certain things. But what if they had different solutions? What if they achieved similar results through mechanical means, through a deep understanding of mathematics and natural forces, through patient observation and careful experimentation? Consider astronomical observations. We think you need telescopes to accurately track planets and stars. But the ancient Babylonians, Greeks, and Romans tracked celestial objects with remarkable precision using only their eyes and careful record-keeping over many generations. They knew the movements of planets well enough to predict their positions years in advance. They identified patterns in eclipses. They understood that the Earth was round and even calculated its size with surprising accuracy. This suggests that ancient scholars had observational tools and techniques that we don't fully understand. Perhaps they had better naked-eye observatories than we realize, structures designed to frame and measure celestial events with precision. Perhaps they used water clocks and other timing devices to measure tiny differences in the movement of celestial bodies. We may have underestimated their capabilities because we're so dependent on our own technology that we can't imagine achieving the same results without it. But here's what keeps me up at night. What if some of the Roman technologies weren't just lost through accident or neglect? What if some were deliberately suppressed? During the transition from the Roman Empire to medieval Europe, the Christian Church became the dominant institution. The Church preserved some ancient knowledge, copying and maintaining texts in monasteries. But they were also selective about what they preserved. Pagan knowledge, anything associated with old Roman religion or mystery cults, was often destroyed or hidden. Medical texts that contradicted religious doctrine were suppressed. Scientific observations that challenged biblical accounts were censored. Could some Roman technologies have been lost because they were associated with pagan practices or because they gave power to people outside church control? Consider this. The Romans had an extensive system of public baths, using advanced plumbing and heating technology. These baths were social centers where people gathered, exchanged ideas, and conducted business. When Christianity became dominant, many saw these baths as sites of moral corruption, places of pagan excess. Bath complexes were closed, fell into ruin, or were deliberately destroyed. With them went the knowledge of how to build and maintain such sophisticated plumbing and heating systems. Some historians argue that the Church's attitude toward technology and science created an environment where ancient knowledge couldn't survive. Why preserve engineering knowledge if the focus is on spiritual salvation rather than worldly improvement? Why maintain libraries of technical documents if the only book that truly matters is the Bible? This may be an oversimplification, but there's likely some truth to it. Knowledge that isn't valued isn't preserved. Yet there's another possibility, one that's even more intriguing. What if some ancient knowledge wasn't lost at all? What if it went underground, preserved by secret societies and esoteric groups throughout the Middle Ages? Many mystery schools and craft guilds claimed to possess ancient secrets. The Freemasons, for example, have long traditions connecting them to ancient builders and engineers. Alchemists preserved chemical and metallurgical knowledge through centuries when such pursuits were dangerous. Could it be that some Roman technological knowledge survived in hidden circles, passed down through coded texts and oral traditions, only resurfacing centuries later during the Renaissance? Many Renaissance inventors and engineers seem to make breakthroughs based on rediscovered ancient texts. They often claimed inspiration from dreams or visions. Were they recreating ancient technology from fragmentary knowledge? Or were they tapping into a continuous hidden tradition? This brings us to one of the most fascinating aspects of Roman technology: their apparent understanding of principles that we only recently rediscovered. Take the Lycurgus cup I mentioned earlier, with its nanotechnology creating different colors depending on light direction. How did 4th century Roman craftsmen create something involving gold nanoparticles? They couldn't see nanoparticles. They couldn't have understood the physics involved, and yet they made it. The conventional explanation is that they discovered the technique by accident and then replicated it without understanding why it worked. That's possible, but it also means that empirical knowledge, knowledge gained through doing rather than through theoretical understanding, was more advanced than we typically assume. Ancient craftsmen might not have understood why something worked, but they knew that it did work, and they perfected techniques through trial and error over many generations. This raises profound questions about the nature of technology and knowledge. Can you have advanced technology without advanced theoretical understanding? The answer, based on Roman achievements, seems to be yes. You can create sophisticated devices and materials through careful observation and experimentation, even if you don't understand the underlying principles in modern scientific terms. But this also makes such knowledge incredibly fragile. If you don't know why something works, only that it does, then if the process gets interrupted, you can't reconstruct it from first principles. You have to rediscover it all over again through the same painstaking trial and error. This is exactly what happened to many Roman technologies. The techniques worked, but when the chain of transmission broke, the knowledge couldn't be recreated from theory alone. As we reach the end of our journey into Rome's lost technologies, we're left with more questions than answers. Did the Romans possess knowledge far beyond what we give them credit for? Almost certainly yes. Was some of that knowledge inherited from even older civilizations? Possibly. Could there have been a lost technological civilization that predated Rome? It's an intriguing theory, though one that lacks definitive proof. Might extraterrestrial contact have played a role in ancient human knowledge? That's a leap too far for most mainstream scholars, but it remains in tantalizing speculation for some. What we know for certain is this: human civilization does not progress in a straight line. Knowledge is gained and knowledge is lost. Technologies rise and fall. What one generation masters, another may forget entirely. The Romans proved that you can build concrete domes that last for millennia, perform sophisticated surgeries, create mechanical computers, and work with materials at a level that we struggle to match even today. And then, almost all of it vanished. The lesson here isn't just about ancient Rome. It's about our own civilization. We live in an age of unprecedented technological advancement. We have more knowledge than any previous human society. We've mapped the human genome, landed robots on Mars, and connected the entire planet through digital networks. We think our knowledge is secure, recorded in books, stored in databases, backed up in the cloud. But what if we're wrong? What if our knowledge is just as fragile as Rome's was? A massive solar flare could destroy our electronic infrastructure. A global catastrophe could disrupt the supply chains and specialized knowledge required to maintain our technology. If our civilization fell tomorrow, what knowledge would survive? Could future archaeologists figure out how our computer chips work? Would they understand our medical techniques? Or would they look at our ruins and wonder how we achieve things that seem impossible to them? The story of lost Roman technology is ultimately a cautionary tale. It reminds us that nothing is permanent, that knowledge must be actively preserved and transmitted, and that we should never take our technological capabilities for granted. The Romans thought their empire would last forever. Their engineers built structures designed for eternity. And in a way, they succeeded. The Pantheon still stands. Roman roads still carry traffic. Roman aqueducts still channel water. But the knowledge that built them died, lost in the chaos of collapse. And it took humanity over 1,000 years to relearn what had been forgotten. What secrets might still be buried in Roman ruins, waiting for modern archaeologists to discover? What technologies might they have possessed that we still haven't found evidence for? And perhaps most intriguingly, what ancient knowledge is still out there, encoded in texts we haven't fully translated, in artifacts we haven't fully understood, in structures whose true purpose we've yet to discover? The mystery of Rome's lost technologies remains one of history's greatest unsolved puzzles. Every new archaeological discovery raises new questions. Every advancement in our own technology helps us understand ancient achievements better while simultaneously revealing how much we still don't know. The Romans left us a legacy written in stone and bronze, in glass and concrete. But they also left us a mystery, a reminder that human knowledge is far more fragile and far more remarkable than we often realize. And somewhere, buried beneath the soil of ancient cities, hidden in collections that haven't been fully cataloged or encoded in texts that haven't been properly studied, there may be more secrets waiting. Technologies that could change how we understand human history. Knowledge that could unlock new possibilities for our own civilization. The search continues. The mystery endures. And the question remains, what else did the Romans know that we've yet to rediscover?